The Kings' 4-game winning streak comes to an end in Miami as they lose to the Heat 106-115. They move to 3-1 on this current road trip, this current 7-game road trip, and the Miami Heat snap their 7-game losing streak, avoiding falling to 500. And honestly, this was about what I expected from this game. Miami coming out just extremely hungry for a win, obviously, but the Kings were able to keep it close despite really poor shooting and the Heat's extremely good shooting from beyond the arc. But in the end, it wasn't enough for the Kings to ultimately pull off the win, but they stayed close. Definitely not a bad loss, and I think the three-point shooting really was the defining aspect of this game. The Kings going 12 for 40, shooting 30%. And the Heat making 13, so one more than the Kings, but shooting 12 less, shooting 28. So they shot 46.4%, and that was even higher for most of the game. I even think the Kings probably got the better of the three-point looks, especially in the first half, but they just couldn't knock them down. I mean, I think the Kings' defense in the first quarter was better than the Heat's defense, and the Kings were getting the open shots. Harrison Barnes for the second game in a row, just getting wide open catch and shoot look after wide open catch and shoot look, but he just wasn't able to knock him down. He went 0 for 6 from 3. And now the Kings can win without shooting amazing from beyond the arc. You know, they've won before shooting 30% from 3, but that requires De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk to be playing much better than they were. And I think they were the two really standout poor performances from this game, because even Harrison Barnes, like, yeah, he wasn't able to knock down his shots, and he has now had 2 straight games where he's been cold, but I mean, that's going to happen sometimes. And with him, it's just now he's not taking 2 shots, he's taking 13 shots, and he's actually trying to get inside sometimes, and he's making sure that he's actually being aggressive. So I don't really have a problem with his performance, especially offensively. Whereas like De'Aaron Fox, I mean, he went 4 for 16 and 1 for 8 from 3. He just settled way too much from deep. And that's what we've been seeing from him a lot lately, where he just won't attack the basket as much. It's like we know he can, and we saw it against the Warriors. Like when he wants to, and he'll establish it early, he'll get right into the paint, get to his short midi, get to his floater, and then he'll work inside out. And then he'll start draining the threes as he's got himself comfortable inside. But there have just been so many games like this where he just doesn't do that at all. I mean, taking half of his shots from 3, but a lot of them were not good 3-point attempts at all. And it was really frustrating because, I mean, we needed him, especially in the fourth quarter. We needed him to get going, and he just never really got into attack mode. The Heat went to a zone in that fourth quarter, and I think even at the start of the third quarter. I mean, they did it throughout the game as well, but it was very effective in the fourth quarter, and the main reason was because our zone breaker wasn't breaking the zone. Like, that's De'Aaron Fox. There were open lanes, and he just wouldn't take them. And it was extremely frustrating to watch the Kings play against this zone because it was just passing around the perimeter, where it'd be you take a screen, but you don't totally draw the defense in, and then you just swing the pass to the next guy, and now you're just back where you started. And they did that a lot against the zone, and it's really on Fox to be able to break that zone, especially when Sabonis was out. And that was the real problem, is if Sabonis is out, then you need Fox to get going, and he just was not. There were also some opportunities for other guys to attack, like Herter had an open lane and he didn't take it, and he just, again, passed it around the perimeter, which is exactly what you can't do against a zone, but it's what they did. But it mainly falls on Fox. And then you have Malik Monk, who just has been really struggling these past 4 or 5 games, whatever it's been. To see Malik Monk have a 0 assist game, I mean, that is crazy. That just doesn't happen with him, ever. He's always at 5 assists, at least. And so having a 0 assist game is wild. 6 points. He only played 14 minutes. I mean, rightfully so. He was just bad. His 3-point shot has obviously fallen off, and he's not hitting the pull-up threes anymore, and that hurts his offensive game. But there are also other parts. I mean, his turnovers have been horrible. 3 turnovers in this one. The Kings started this game off turning the ball over a lot. 5 turnovers in the first quarter. They only turned it over 9 times on the game. So they adjusted, and they were much better in terms of taking care of the ball. In fact, it was that way for both teams. The Heat ended with 8 after, I believe, also having 5 in the first quarter. But Malik also couldn't get much going to the rim. Like, he got 3 buckets, but I mean, that 0 assists just shows he wasn't creating much outside of those few moments where he finally was able to get to the rim and score. And when Monk and Fox are both not scoring or creating, plus your other guys aren't really hitting 3-point shots at a great percentage other than Keegan, I don't know how this team is supposed to win if those 2 or 3, however you want to look at it, those things are happening at the same time. It was nice to see that the Kings were still in the game, though. Like, other guys like Sabonis and Keegan and others, like, they kept the Kings in the game, and they gave, mainly Fox, like, they gave him every chance to finally show up until, it was very late when the Kings were finally out of this game. It's like they gave him a full, 45 minutes. It's like, if you just show up for the last 3 minutes, they still might be able to make, something happen here. But they just weren't able to. I mean, you could see it from the very start. The Kings got 3 wide open looks to start the game from 3, and they only made 1 of them. And then you have Jimmy Butler coming down and hitting a 3. And Harrison Barnes got the Jimmy Butler assignment, which is obviously not great for the Kings. And that's just the roster limitations right there, because the Kings obviously did not want to throw Kevin Huerter on Jimmy Butler, but they also didn't want to throw Kevin Huerter on Tyler Hero or Terry Rozier. I mean, personally, I probably would have just thrown Huerter on one of the other 2 guards, but the Kings didn't want to do that, so it was Keegan guarding Tyler Hero. I would have put Keegan on Jimmy Butler, but the Kings' strategy was just put Barnes on Jimmy Butler and have him lay off and force him to be a jump shooter as much as possible. And Jimmy Butler knocked down those shots, went 2 for 3 from 3, and also found other ways to get inside still. And, even when Keegan did get switched on to Jimmy's just really hard to stop. And he would still get inside. He would still draw fouls. And so that's just a tough matchup in general. I mean, I thought on the game as a whole, the Kings defense was fine. Like, a pretty average game is what I would say. And obviously you don't expect the Heat to be shooting the way they were. Like, the Kings were giving up solid 3-point looks, I would say. They weren't wide open 3-point looks though. And so you still don't expect that percentage. And so I thought, it wasn't too bad of a night from this Kings defense. Allowing 115 points is pretty normal. Just the Kings usually score more than that, and they were only able to get up 106. But let's talk about Keegan Murray, because Keegan was amazing in this game. The leading scorer on the game as a whole, even outscoring Jimmy Butler. He had 33 points. He had 21 in the first half. I thought they definitely could have gotten him involved more in the second half, but he only really got involved like late in the fourth quarter. It took a while, and so you'd like to see him get involved a bit more, especially early in the half when he's already on 21 points, but still an amazing game from him. And he kept the Kings in the game on both ends of the court. Amazing shooting and scoring. And then also on the defensive end, getting deflections, getting blocks, making things tough inside. He had 2 blocks, 1 steal. Just an amazing performance from him, but the type of performance that we're getting more and more used to, I think, because he's done this a few times now this season, shooting this efficiently. And honestly, these past few games, Keegan has been fine on the offensive end, but I keep just expecting a little more from him. Like, I just keep expecting a longer stretch of games where he is just shooting the lights out. And maybe that's coming now, but I definitely feel like at some point it's coming where Keegan is going to have a stretch of 4-5 games where he's just going off offensively in every single game. But I think Keegan was the guy that was kind of keeping this from being a blowout, and then it was Sabonis's aggressiveness. Like Keegan just needed one other guy to step up and help him offensively to get the Kings back in the game. And so Sabonis did that in the second quarter. I mean, Domas was really struggling, didn't score in the first. I thought he passed up some open looks with Bam, just practically playing him under the rim. And Sabonis just could not finish over Bam early on. And then there was a period where the Kings, they got down 18, and you could just tell Sabonis took things upon himself, which is what I love to see, because I don't feel like we see that from him enough, where he's just like, okay, I just missed 1 or 2 shots, or I missed, my first 4 shots. I feel like a lot of times if that happens to him, he then gets too passive and he doesn't look to score. But he just totally took it upon himself to get the Kings back in the game. And he did just that. I mean, he got fouled going to the rim and he missed 2 free throws in a row. He was still sitting on 0 points. It felt like it was just going to be one of those games for him. But then again, he responded after those 2 missed free throws, not by being passive, but by being even more aggressive than he had been. And so he was getting inside, he was creating for others, and the connection between him and Keegan was amazing, especially the interior passing. I've talked about this multiple times before, but I haven't talked about it in a long time, I feel like. Keegan is one of the Kings' best passers when it comes to entry passes in the post or just passing inside and trying to find Sabonis, because there will be so many times where Domas will have position and the Kings just can't get him the ball. But Keegan always does a really good job of that. And vice versa, it's the same. When Keegan's inside, Domas is finding him. So we saw multiple instances of them finding each other for easy buckets. And so it was Domas and Keegan that really got the Kings back in the game. And it was also the pace the Kings were playing with. I mean, I think Fox did a good job of pushing the pace early on. And then the Kings in that second quarter, like Sabonis just kept pushing the pace off of rebounds, which is so key to the Kings offense, especially against a tough Miami team. Davion pushed the pace, got an and one. And obviously this run was sparked by the Kings defense as well. And it was a lot about Keegan defensively, but other guys as well. Like I thought Herter had a good defensive game, and he's been really good defensively recently. Like when Keegan and Herter would come back into the game after being on the bench, like you could just see the shift. Like it wasn't just Keegan making things happen defensively, it was also Herter getting deflections. And Herter and Keegan, like I thought they both had really good games in similar ways. Obviously Herter not as on fire as Keegan, 2 for 6 from 3, 6 for 12 from the field, but I thought they were both doing a good job, obviously defensively like I talked about, but also attacking the rim early on when the Kings were pushing the pace. And Herter just looked extremely confident, like he has been offensively, and he doesn't necessarily need to be knocking down shots, or he doesn't even need to see a few shots go through before he looks confident. He just looks confident immediately. And so that's good to see. And it just helps him create for others. I mean, Herter in this game for the Kings was second in assists with 4 to Sabonis, who had 13. The problem for the Kings, I mean, a big problem is when Sabonis goes out, a lot of times Keegan will go with him and Herter will follow shortly after. And it's like, oh, the bench just got totally worked by the Miami bench in this one. The Kings bench had 18 points. Josh Richardson off the Heat bench alone had 24. And then you have Jaime Jaquez with 8. You have Caleb Martin with 7. You have Kevin Love with 8. The Kings really struggled to defend against Kevin Love in the pick and pop. And there were some miscommunications. There were some moments of the Kings falling asleep, especially on backdoor cuts. The third quarter was definitely rough defensively for most of it. I thought the first half was pretty good defensively, but it was just the Heat they were making shots. It wasn't perfect from the Kings, but it was solid enough where I wasn't too concerned about the Heat putting up 59. In the third quarter, it was kind of a parade to the rim, and it was definitely worse. And just when the Kings starters come out, the bench has been rough. I mean, you saw Kessler Edwards get one early minute. Maybe, maybe it's two. It says one. It's probably, one plus. But that quickly was abandoned. Trey Lyles hasn't been great defensively, but he wasn't terrible. But then we have JaVale McGee playing 6 minutes. I mean, he's definitely not even close to the reason we lost the game or anything, but just why? I don't understand. You have Davion Mitchell, 12 minutes, who he looked rough offensively, apart from pushing the pace and getting that and one. But there were just multiple moments of him being open and not shooting and slowing the Kings offense down. And then obviously Malik Monk just playing really poorly. Just when Sabonis was off the floor, it felt like the Kings were just constantly chucking threes because they couldn't get any penetration inside and they couldn't get any good offense going. It felt like the Kings had a chance to take control of the game in the third quarter. Like, obviously they had that big run in the second quarter to cut it from 18 to 4 by halftime. And then they came out of the halftime break. They were clicking offensively. They even got a lead by 1 point, I believe. Herter knocked down a three. Fox knocked down a three. And they had a chance, it felt like, to take control of the game. And they just didn't do that because of the defense. Too many just falling asleep on cuts. There were a lot of moments where Fox got switched onto Jimmy Butler, like just too easily. And I didn't really understand that. But obviously the Kings had to make an adjustment in the third quarter to run the Heat off the 3-point line. And so that just made it really hard to guard the interior. So it led to some Bam lobs and just Jimmy Butler getting inside and drawing fouls. I thought in the first half, Sabonis did a great job of guarding Bam, and his verticality was great. And like I said, Herter had really good moments of defending, especially inside, and Keegan did as well. But then it just got a lot tougher in the third quarter when the Kings had to run the shooters off the line. Barnes even had some good moments inside. Like, his good defense is just standing there. And honestly, a lot of times that's enough because you're not fouling the guy and he's just going straight up. And a lot of times that is enough. And so it doesn't look great, but it is effective just defending straight up without fouling. I think Barnes had 0 points going into halftime and he ended the game with 9. Obviously his shooting was horrible, but I'm not really worried about his shooting. He's been pretty consistent all year, shooting well from 3, especially the corners. He just hasn't been good these last 2 games. But I liked that he started to get inside more in the second half, and he was looking for his own offense, and he was trying to get to the free throw line, so I appreciated that. And that's all I ask for him. He doesn't need to be going off every game, but in an off shooting game for him, he still scores 9 points. I think that's all right. It's just a loss that you can't get too mad at. I thought it was going to be worse in the first half, but Sabonis turned it around into that monster triple-double, 19 points, 13 assists, 17 rebounds, which is insane. Add a steal and a block and only 1 turnover on 50% from the field. Knocked down his only 3. His 3-point shooting has been insane. I mean, if he keeps this up, very soon he's going to be at 50% on the year. And, I mean, just take one more a game. Just one more a game. Instead of taking 1 a game, take 2 a game. That's what I ask from him. It also would be nice to see him take a few of those mid-rangers, especially early on. He doesn't even need to make them all the time. But just, I feel like taking them will make other teams realize, okay, he's going to be shooting this shot. They can't just be right under the rim. It makes them think about it. It also makes his pump fake more effective. I don't know how Kevin Love is falling for his pump fake. Anybody who falls for a Sabonis pump fake, like a Sabonis pump fake not in the paint, let me be clear. A pump fake outside of the paint on a jump shot. What are you doing? How do you fall for that? Obviously inside, I get it. But outside the paint, I don't know how people are still falling for those. This is just one of those games where you didn't shoot well. You had won the previous 4. Miami was hungry. It's kind of like you did what you could and you move on. The Kings now move to the Midwest for their last 3 games of the road trip. First in Indiana. Indiana will be on the second night of a back-to-back after being in New York the previous night. The Pacers are healthier than the last time we saw them. I mean, they have Siakam playing now, obviously. Halliburton's been back, although they've been kind of managing him a little bit. They have some other guys with some injury concerns, but they're healthier than the last time we saw them. And, well, the last time we saw them in Sacramento, that was not a fun game at all. That sucked. TJ McConnell just destroying us. Just no effort defensively at all. And this is the type of game where if you come in not ready to play like the Kings have done a lot this season, like you could get blown out of the water real quick against this Indiana Pacers side. I'm interested in to see the matchups. I mean, I think we're going to throw Harrison Barnes on Pascal Siakam. And I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a horrible matchup for Harrison Barnes because he can lay off and force Siakam to try to shoot. I do wonder if we throw Keegan out onto Halliburton. I feel like that will probably be the matchup. And so that one will be very interesting to watch. Anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. I will be back on Friday to recap that game against the Indiana Pacers. So I'll see you guys then. Peace.